My name is Rachel Jeffs, and my father is Warren Jeffs. Warren Jeffs is the FLDS leader and prophet. He is considered next to God in our religion. My father has around 80 wives, and he has 53 kids.
The FLDS is a religion denounced by the modern-day Mormons for their practice of polygamy and very fundamentalist beliefs. But it actually goes much deeper than just polygamy. It's actually even been proven to include the sales and exchange of minors. Maybe not always for money, but definitely for status. And this religion forces 9 and 10-year-olds to marry their own uncles, their own blood relatives. Truthfully, it's a religion that views women as nothing more than a piece of property. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to dive not only into the history of the FLDS, but we also are going to talk about the leader, Warren Jeffs' downfall, and even go into the newest scandal that's taking place right now within the barriers of the FLDS community. It is going to be a very interesting video. I personally have been so fascinated with the FLDS religion and all of these things since I even found out about it. I think actually when I was watching Big Love, if you remember that series. There's just something very fascinating and, in my opinion, don't come for me, very cult-like about this, which also always intrigues my mind. So we're unraveling everything. We're going into the latest updates of what's been happening in this religion or belief system, whatever you personally want to call it. We're going to talk about all of it. It's not going to be comfy, guys. It's going to be uncomfy, but I know we're friends here. We're going to hang out. We're going to talk about it, and I can be real with you. So, my name is Elise, guys, and let's dive right into the craziness. First, let's talk about what the FLDS is, because it can be pretty confusing. The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the FLDS Church, as we will be referring to it as, because that other statement and name is just like a huge mouthful. It's basically a religious sect of the fundamentalist Mormon denominations whose members practice polygamy. And just in case you aren't familiar with polygamy, polygamy is the practice of marrying multiple spouses. Usually, in most cases, it's when a man is married to multiple women at once, which you've probably heard of the show Sister Wives. It's the same kind of concept. However, in rare cases, there are some families where the women are married to multiple men as well. And TLC did a show on this called Brother Husbands, I believe it was called, and it's pretty wild, just look it up. But the FLDS emerged in the early 20th century, when its founding members were excommunicated from the Church of Latter-day Saints. Now, the LDS Church is not to be confused with the FLDS Church, two separate things, largely because of their refusal to abandon the practice of plural marriage after it was denounced by the church in 1904. Polygamy is in fact illegal in the United States, and it is not a protected American right. However, it is almost never prosecuted because it is so hard to prove, and officials do not necessarily want to disrupt family units, which personally I don't agree with, because a lot of the time in these family units, quote unquote, there is grooming happening, there is, assaults happening, and it just can get really, really dark and ugly. The FLDS are taught that they are the one and only true people of God on earth, and that being part of the FLDS means that you have the highest degree of salvation. They are taught that God's picture of earth is for a man to have multiple wives, and in order to reach the highest degree of the celestial kingdom, you must have at least 3 wives. If you did reach this top tier, then in the afterlife, you would basically become a god yourself. But one thing that was never taught is what women would become, other than just a wife. And that's what we're going to learn throughout this video, that in this religion, women are seen as nothing more than a piece of property, a possession, if you will. This community is known to take place in 2 neighboring towns, Colorado City, Arizona, and Hilldale, Utah. It is widely known as the Short Creek community. These two places border each other and really are one of the most unwelcoming places in the country. This community is historically known for its practice of polygamy. So in order to get a good grasp over what kind of religious community or cult this may be, I'll let you decide on that, we're going to go back in time a little bit. And I'm going to give you a very short, condensed history of how the FLDS Church became what it is today, because I believe you need to know where it's been, to where it was going, to where it is now, in order to not only understand it fully, but also to see how completely effed up it is, in my opinion. So Rulon Jeffs was an American polygamist and a religious leader who served as the president of the FLDS from 1986 until his death in 2002. Rulon was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, on December 6, 1909. He was not introduced to the teachings of Mormon fundamentalism until September 25, 1938, when his father presented him with a copy of Joseph W. Musser's Truth magazine. Rulon embraced Musser's fundamentalist teachings, immediately almost, and in 1940, he secretly took a plural wife, which resulted in his first wife, Zola Brown, divorcing him, saying, I ain't doing this, I'm outie. Now, court records stated that the Mormon couple had been fighting over something that she dreaded, his desire to marry another wife and join the ranks of the polygamists. Rulon had told her that he had taken a trip to the mountains and had a vision of the woman that God wanted him to marry. It was a girl who worked in a store in Provo, Utah. Now, of course, Zola was not for this by any means, and he responded by telling her that if she did not embrace polygamy and accept this other wife, that things would never be the same between them. And she's like, okay, that's fine. So she ended up filing for divorce due to his persistence in taking on this plural wife. And 2 weeks after the divorce, Rulon was excommunicated from the LDS Church, and this was on April 14th, 1941. And I just have to say, before we continue, this is something that always fascinates me and really actually kind of angers me when we're talking about religious beliefs and cults and things like that, is when people jump to the fact that they saw a vision. No, I was on top of a mountain and I saw a vision from God of this person that he wants me to marry, who coincidentally usually happens to be some like beautiful, young, bombshell, sometimes underage, beautiful girl. And it's like, oh, that's who God just picked for you to marry, even though you're already married? Give me a break. It's not a vision, bro. It is your thinking and running your brain. But let's just call it what it is. That's my opinion. Okay. So let me continue. Sorry. I know I'm getting a little crazy in this one, guys. It's just like I have a lot of feelings. So in the spring of 1945, Rulon, who had been working in northern Idaho since 1943, returned to Salt Lake City, where he was ordained a high priest apostle. And after the death of the former FLDS leader Leroy Johnson, Rulon took leadership of the group. This was in 1986, and he became the self-proclaimed prophet. I hate the word prophet too. It's like a trigger word for me. So the prophet is basically a representation of God on earth. Followers were taught that their prophet knows all of their thoughts, all of their dreams, their wishes, everything. Nothing is private, nothing is secretive. The prophet knows everything. So he's the one who decides who gets married, who marries who, and what man is deserving of adding wives into his family. This was called the placement principle. There was no dating, no courting, and in most cases, these people who were placed in these arranged marriages didn't even know each other. Or worse, they were related to each other. When a father of a young girl felt as if their daughter was old enough to marry, or be married off, I should say, the father would present them to the prophet in hopes that they would be married. Now, one of these girls was Rebecca Musser, who is pretty much a voice for those who have escaped the grasps of the FLDS Church. Rebecca was married off to Rulon when she was 19 years old, and he was 85 years old. Ugh, gross.
They are taught from birth what to wear, who they are, where they fit in society, how to behave, how to talk, how to think.
Rebecca Musser says she was brainwashed by one of the largest cults in the nation.
Every choice for them is do what you're told, or you will be eternally damned.
She grew up as a member of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a group that splintered from the Mormon Church over polygamy nearly 100 years ago.
I remember being told that this group, this very small group of people, were the only righteous ones, and God would destroy the entire rest of the world.
At 19, she was forced to marry the cult's 85-year-old leader and prophet, Rulon Jeffs. For the next 7 years, she endured abuse from him and even some of her 65 sister wives.
When was your breaking point?
When Rulon Jeffs died and Warren, his son, was forcing his father's young wives to be remarried, that was it. I figured if that was heaven, I would take hell. I could not bring myself to go into another situation where I was being forced into sexual violation in the name of God.
The followers of the FLDS under Rulon were told that he would never die, and that he would one day be made young again. So when Rulon's health began to seriously decline, you could imagine what kind of confusion this brought to his followers, his believers, his faithful servants, if you will. Rulon Jeffs led this organization until his death in 2002. He died at the age of 92, and according to documents, it's believed that he had approximately 65 wives and 62 children. I mean, guys, talk about overkill. One of those 62 children was a son named Warren Jeffs, who was born nearly 2 months prematurely in 1955. Now, I'm sure even if you don't know all of the inner workings of the FLDS, you probably are familiar with the name Warren Jeffs. And every time I hear his voice, it sends a shiver down my spine or up my spine. I don't know what the correct phrase is for that. But like the creepiest voice, you'll hear a little bit of it later, but like, I can't. Okay. So anyways, now his mother, Marilyn, always pushed Warren to be close with his father, Rulon. She thought that he was so special because of his circumstances of surviving being premature. She stated that previous prophets had visited her in a dream and told her that Warren was going to be a very special person. So this made Warren grow up to have this holier-than-thou type complex and personality. And he wasn't liked by many people growing up. He was awkward, weird, and kind of nerdy, if I'm being honest. But he had this proud way of being able to read people, to pick up on what was important to them, and to use that to manipulate and control them. Almost kind of like a brainwashing technique where you know exactly the right things to pull out of somebody to play on their emotions, to play on their inner thoughts and what they desire, to where they then believe that you truly are smarter than you actually are. As Warren grew older, his father gave him more responsibility in the church. And as soon as Warren recognized that he had this power, he took full advantage of it and practiced it vigorously. He had this saying, and it was, "Perfect obedience is led by a hair," meaning that a hair is so thin and that perfect obedience could be led by it, and you would not break it, but that if there was any resistance, then it would break the hair. So from there, Warren's influence led to the purging of all things that did not support the FLDS beliefs. Any book that was not approved by Warren himself was banned from the libraries. In science textbooks as well, anything having to do with the solar system or reproduction was removed and actually literally cut out of the books. Warren also created a curriculum specifically for the girls of the FLDS that he would teach in the schools. He taught from a book called Purity in the New and Everlasting Covenant of Marriage, which basically taught to have nothing in your brain except to do the prophet's will and to even have thoughts of boys in any capacity that could cloud that channel. That you were only supposed to think of the prophet. It's only the prophet. It's always the prophet. Nothing else but the prophet. So as Warren's father's health was declining, this is when he really began to grow closer to Rulon and started slowly taking over. His teachings became even scarier. He began to teach more about God's wrath and basically told the people of the church that they were going to be destroyed and cleansed off of the face of the earth if they did not live according to the FLDS and to submit to all of the prophet's teachings, because it was directly from God himself. It was all fear-based to get these people to conform to his ways. In 2002, the Olympics were set to be hosted in Salt Lake City. So Warren began to preach about how the world is going to be destroyed during the Olympics and that they needed to get everybody down from Salt Lake City to the Shore Creek community as soon as they possibly could. And people listened. People sold their homes and gave up their businesses because they believed that the end of the world was coming. And almost immediately, the Shore Creek community grew from around 2,000 people to around 10,000 people. Warren needed to get everyone into one place so that he could essentially control them easier. So everybody waited and waited and waited and waited for something to happen, which of course it never came. A la Y2K, when everybody thought the year 2000 was gonna, like, the whole world was going to, like, disintegrate or something, and that computers were the devil. I remember that. I was like, hi, now it's like January 2nd, nothing's happened. So nothing came, and Warren had no explanation for this. He told the people that it was just a test, and that God had granted them a little more time, and the time was granted so that they could become more righteous, meaning that they needed to be more perfect and more obedient. In 2002, after Rulon died, Warrens fully took over. And everybody was very confused by the death, because they were always taught that he would never die, that he was going to become young again. They were taught that he was supposed to be the last prophet, the one to bring them into the millennium. So people were scared. They didn't know what was supposed to happen now. And what were his 65 wives now supposed to do? And all of his children. So many people just waited for him to literally sit up and come alive again and be renewed again. In the many weeks after Rulon's funeral, Warren was speaking as though his father was renewed and that his father had just assumed his body now, like reincarnated into Warren's body. And slowly over time and with much manipulation, people began to believe that Warren was the next prophet of God. Warren even helped himself to his late father's many wives. Yes, he married many of his mothers that helped raise him. Just creepy and gross. Ugh. There were many horrible things that Warren Jeffs did during his reign. He manipulated his loyal followers' beliefs and turned it all into money, power, and sex, even preaching that whatever the Lord commands through his prophet is right, even if it seems wrong to our traditions. So things began to change even more. Rules were becoming more stricter, work was becoming much more harsh, no movies or television was ever allowed, and everyone had to sign their property over to the church, and everybody had to turn in all of their guns. But most of the laws and rules were directed only toward the women. Before Warren, women could dress however they pleased, as long as they were covered and not dressed super exposed, but now they weren't allowed to wear any denim, any pants, or anything red. Then he implemented that they all had to wear long undergarments from the wrist to the bottom of their feet, almost like a full catsuit, if you will. And I'm sure you have seen certain examples of this on certain television shows or news networks when there are raids happening of these communities where the women are, in these huge overly bloussoned peasant dresses all the way down to their ankle, their long sleeves, they have the braid in their hair, they're covered literally head to toe. Very similar to that. Now, Warren first came onto investigators' radar after discovering that hundreds of teenage young boys were being kicked out of the FLDS community, leaving them homeless. These boys were called the Lost Boys. When you are marrying all of these young girls off to these older men, there, of course, is a surplus of boys that what are you going to do with them? You got to get rid of them. They're not going to marry the young girls because these young girls are getting married to these decrepit old men who are wearing geriatric shoes and stuff like that. What are you going to do with these young studs? Nothing. You got to purge them, right? Because they're stepping on your territory. They're threatening all your weird marriages because clearly a young girl is going to prefer a hot young guy versus an 89-year-old man with spots and no hair and wrinkles and who can't even move. But I'm not trying to be ageism here, guys. I'm just keeping it real. So they had to get rid of all these young guys because they were a threat, obviously. This all happened, and you had the Lost Boys who were essentially homeless. And Warren went on to have many more women. He had a total of 87 wives, with the youngest one being 12 years old. Mary Ann Jessup is known as the youngest wife of Warren Jeffs. On July 27, 2006, 12-year-old Mary Ann was escorted to the temple by her parents. She hadn't even had her first menstrual cycle yet. There, she was sealed for time and all eternity to Warren Jeffs. During the wedding ceremony, they were expected to consummate the marriage, where Warren truly assaulted Mary Ann while many of his other wives watched. Warren has approximately 60 children. Rachel Jeffs was known to be the favorite child of Warren, but she was the favorite for all of the wrong reasons. In 2004, Brent Jeffs, Warren's nephew, filed a lawsuit against his uncle for repeatedly assaulting him with objects, if you get what I'm saying, in the 1980s. Brent stated that he kept the situation a secret for so long because of the amount of shame and guilt that he felt. But after so many years of nightmares, he could no longer keep it inside, and he needed to do something about it. When he told his family about that abuse, he was shocked to hear that his brothers said the same thing happened to them as well. In June of 2005, Warren was charged in Arizona with assault on a minor and conspiracy to commit sexual misconduct, again, of a minor. In July, the Arizona Attorney General's office released wanted posters rewarding $10,000 seeking information leading to the arrest of Warren Jeffs. In April of 2006, a warrant for Warren's arrest was issued in Utah for felony charges for accomplice of rape of a teenage girl between the ages of 14 and 18 years old. At this point, due to the multiple charges being filed in multiple states, the FBI got involved, and they put this false prophet wannabe on their FBI 10 Most Wanted list and offered a $60,000 reward, which was soon raised to $100,000. However, Warren continued to arrange his child bride marriages up until his arrest in 2006. On August 26th, he was pulled over in Nevada due to an improperly displayed temporary license plate, where he was arrested and taken into custody on his warrants. Warren was extradited back to Utah, and in January of 2007, he tried to take his own life through hanging, but was found in time and survived. His trial lasted 2 weeks and included testimony from many of his victims and former FLDS members. The defense, of course, argued that this was a case of religious persecution and claimed that Warren was being judged for his belief and practice of polygamy, which, yeah, dude, that's exactly what you're being judged for, because polygamy is illegal and you're marrying children and you're sexual with these children and attacking and assaulting these children. Like, I can't with the religious card always being played to try to get the sympathy or the defense. I hate it. So Warren Jeffs was, of course, found guilty, no surprise, and in September of 2007, he was sentenced to 10 years to life in prison. Warren was also scheduled to be tried in Arizona. He had entered a not guilty plea on February 27, 2008, to the sex charges stemming from the arranged marriages of 3 teenage girls to older men. On June 9, 2010, a state judge dismissed all charges with prejudice. The Arizona victims no longer wanted to testify, and Warren had already spent almost 2 years in jail awaiting trial, more time than he would have received had he been convicted. So combined with the pending charges against Warren in Texas, they concluded that it would be impractical and unnecessary to try him in Arizona. But as all of this was happening, the FLDS community hadn't shut down, not by a stretch. The FLDS organization purchased a 1,700-acre ranch in El Dorado, Texas. On the property, they built a temple, a 29,000-square-foot home for Warren, a meeting house, and other homes on this land. An estimated 500 to 700 people moved there from the Short Creek community. This property was named the Yearning for Zion Ranch, also known as the YZR. In March of 2008, a domestic hotline received a call from a female at the YZR who claimed that she was 16 years old and was the victim of sexual and physical assault. The call turned out to be fraudulent, but it triggered a heavy response from law enforcement involving assault weapons, helicopters, and armored vehicles. Due to evidence that was seized in the raid, 6 FLDS members were found guilty on various sex crime charges against young girls ages 14 through 16. After the raid in 2008, Warren Jeffs was indicted in Texas on a felony sex charge regarding a child, and this charge was for his own sexual conduct with his 12-year-old wife. Utah chose to drop the charges against him so that he could be extradited to Texas to stand trial there, probably because they knew that Texas doesn't really play. That's just my opinion. During the 2011 trial, the jury heard testimony from a psychologist who treated 22 former members of the FLDS church cult, whatever you believe it to be. 2 former FLDS members testified that Warren had RAPE'd them when they were less than 8 years old. The court also heard testimony that he wanted younger and younger wives, and of his over 70 now wives, 24 of them were under the age of 18. And I just want to say, this is all of the documented accounts that we know of. Imagine what this monster has done that is not documented and that nobody has seen. This is only the stuff that is black and white documented. That is scary, scary stuff. On August 9th, 2011, Warren was convicted in Texas of the 2 counts against the child and sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole on July 22nd, 2038. However, Warren still runs this cult from behind prison walls, the best that he can. But from 2006 on, there was no real guidance in Short Creek. There were no new marriages, and in 2010, Warren told them from prison that they should all be practicing abstinence, even the ones who are married, because, if he's not getting any, then neither is anybody else, I suppose. I guess that must be the mentality. No new marriages, no more having sex. Even if you're married, don't have sex, which, let's just be honest, a lot of married people don't have sex as it is. I know I'm going to get canceled for saying that probably, but it's true. Okay, so anyways, so he tells everybody, you need to practice abstinence, no more marriages, no more canoodling, nothing. And for the most part, everyone obeyed. They listened to him, even though he was in prison giving these directives. After 2010, Warren began to communicate outside of the prison less, which brought on a sort of emptiness to the people of Short Creek in that community. And now this brings us to Samuel Bateman, the man who was more than eager to fill this void and to step into his place. 46-year-old Samuel Bateman was raised in the FLDS faith in that Short Creek community. He came from an extremely unpopular family in the community, and to be honest, this guy grew up to be the biggest loser of them all. Honestly, just a sorry piece of crap with small man syndrome, honestly. And you're gonna see why in a second. In 1999, something happened in Samuel's life that would change his personality and really dictate his future path from here on out. A group of young people from Short Creek were heading to another polygamist community in northern Canada known as Bountiful, British Columbia. 4 men in their late teens and early 20s, one of these men being Samuel, were escorting 2 teenage girls to this location, 14-year-old Victoria Cook and 15-year-old Jamie Cook. These girls were both sisters who had been caught acting out and sneaking out of their houses to meet with boys, which, as we know, in the FLDS community is extremely forbidden. The then prophet, Rulon Jeffs, had been meeting with their parents, and it was his decision to send Jamie and her sister to a man named Winston Blackmore. This person was the leader of the community up north. And by the way, this guy had over 150 children and 27 wives, also many of whom were underaged. It was Rulon's opinion that spending time with Winston would set the Cook sisters straight and remind them of the proper way to honor God. He also thought that they would make good wives for some of the men up there. So as they were driving through the night through Montana, the driver either fell asleep or hit black ice, unclear. But all Victoria remembers is being abruptly woken up when the Suburban that they were in rolled. All of the passengers were ejected from the vehicle, and Victoria remembered seeing Samuel lying nearby wailing and moaning in pain. Everyone was airlifted to a nearby hospital, and out of all of the passengers, Samuel and Victoria were the most injured. Samuel reportedly suffered from a brain injury, and those that knew him reported that this is when a flip just kind of switched in him. He was apparently never the same again, and his personality totally changed. He became even more strict and devout in his religious beliefs. Samuel struggled throughout his life. He made excuses for himself constantly. He never really valued up to anything at all. He was honestly just kind of like a total loser. In 2019, Samuel was financially struggling as well because he apparently was not good at his job as an insurance salesman, and he wasn't making any money. He and a group of other FLDS members traveled to Nebraska to find work, and while in Nebraska, something came up about how no one has had any direct instructions from Warren Jeffs since 2010. It's been 9 years now. So they started questioning things and theorizing off of each other. So they all decided to pray directly to the Heavenly Father, hoping for some answers as to what was to come next and what to do next. Samuel came back and he informed the others that he had received a vision, another vision on a mountaintop. And this vision that he says he had was that Warren Jeffs had not been in touch with them because he had died while he was in prison. Samuel also added that he had gotten instructions from the Heavenly Father that he was supposed to be the new prophet. which, by the way, Warren Jeffs is most definitely not dead. He is very much alive, and he's actually even denounced Samuel as a prophet. But keep in mind that a lot of these people don't have access to the internet. They don't have the resources to be able to look up this information themselves and validate it. So they pretty much just believed anyone who says that they've had a vision from Heavenly Father, because who are they to question God? The other members were convinced, and they followed Samuel back to the Short Creek community in 2021, where he basically just assumed power. And like I said, no one is going to question God in this community, so they all just took to it. Samuel immediately became obsessed with accumulating money and material things, even though he didn't have a job. He also became obsessed with getting wives. He made all of his male followers go out to work and give him a percentage of their earnings, while also giving them some of their wives and even their daughters, this exchange of sorts. A former follower of this fake prophet, named Morani Johnson, told the Daily Mail how the 46-year-old took advantage of the deep-seated fundamentalist Mormon faith and controlled him with a toxic mix of physical, mental, and even sexual targeted assaults. So devoted to his faith, Morani allowed Samuel to marry several of his wives and most of his daughters. He also funded his lavish lifestyle, which included 2 homes in Colorado City and multiple Bentleys, the car, like money, money, money. He took part in the most humiliating rituals that were demanded by Samuel as well. On one occasion, he was even made to have sex with one of his wives in front of their daughter in order to show them, the daughters, how to please Samuel. Sick, sick, sick. In May of 2020, the wife of Morani claimed that Samuel came into their home and took several of their daughters, including the youngest, who was just 9 years old. This wife also believes that Samuel RAPE'd her 9-year-old daughter because the older daughters communicated to her that the younger daughter had been wetting the bed. They also stated that by her wetting the bed, it disgusted and enraged Samuel, especially when the urine would get on him while they were sleeping, which, why are you sleeping in the same bed as a 9-year-old? You creep, creep, creep. It was said that Morani was in anguish and extreme stress about having to give his youngest daughter to Samuel, but despite that, he still remained an obedient follower. He made a statement later saying, "We were taught perfect obedience procedures, perfect faith. If there is a supreme being, wouldn't you want to meet him?" He, meaning Samuel, preyed on our devotion to Scripture. And just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, Samuel even laid claim to his own teenage daughter, bribing her with $50, 2 large bags of Doritos, and a promise of riding on an airplane if she would agree to be his wife, his daughter. So now it's like you're getting in your own bloodline, you want your daughter to be your wife. It is sick. It is, I need a new word for sick. It is like horrifying, humiliating, disgusting, nerve-grinding, gut-wrenching, you name it. Now this all was way too much for Lydia, his first wife. She told him that their daughter would never be his wife. She then took their daughter and left, eventually filing for divorce and negotiating a custody agreement that banned Samuel from ever having any contact with his daughter again. I mean, hero status right here. And honestly, just good for her, because this is the first and the only time in this story that we see one of these women have the wherewithal to actually protect their children and not sell them off, not bring them to the temple on a silver platter for these gross, perverted men. But Samuel Bateman's reign, although aggressive and swift in as far as how quickly it came on, it didn't last long. Not long at all, because he's an actual idiot. On August 28th, 2022, Samuel Bateman was pulled over in Flagstaff, Arizona, after a patrol officer noticed small fingers and small hands sticking out of a wooden horse trailer that was being pulled by a truck. Authorities reported that inside this unventilated trailer, they found 3 girls, ages 11 to 14, who were using a bucket as a toilet.
That's right. It was this situation that led to an FBI investigation into Samuel Bateman. Now, we want to warn you, while this video is edited, some may find it disturbing. Body camera video shows the moments authorities pulled over this truck and trailer in Flagstaff. The reason why?
Saw fingers poking out of the trailer.
With guns drawn, they opened the doors.
See the hands!
Finding 3 young girls.
How old are you? 14. How old are you? 11? How old are you? 12?
Also inside the trailer, a couch, camping chairs, and a makeshift toilet. When they tried questioning the girls, this woman in the maroon dress stepped in.
Basically telling them all not.
Then one of the officers noticed.
A 14-year-old, she had a ring on her finger, on her ring finger. They've all kind of like hidden those. I mean, we know what's going on here.
Police say the person driving the truck is this man, Samuel Bateman. Court documents claim Bateman is a self-proclaimed prophet, part of the polygamous group with the FLDS. Investigators say Bateman has dozens of followers and more than 20 wives, many of them underage. He's also accused of sexually abusing multiple girls, trafficking them across state lines.
As you can see, it's a pretty serious deal here, sir.
Police tried to question him about the trailer.
How many other people in the truck?
But Bateman refuses to answer.
How many other people are in the truck?
When another officer tries,
Explain to me what's going on.
Calm down first.
Bateman was eventually arrested.
Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back.
Samuel was taken into custody, arrested, and booked into the Coconino County Jail. He was charged with 3 counts of child endangerment, but was released from state custody when one of his followers, Torrance Bistline, posted his $150,000 bail using a business check from a company called Velociraptor, which is a company founded by the Bistline family where they build self-propelled wrapping cable machines for wind and solar farms. And the Bistline family are huge followers of Samuel, no surprise. And Samuel is also married to one of the Bistline daughters, Naomi. So when Samuel was in jail, he managed to get instructions to his followers that they should go ahead and delete electronic evidence off of their cell phones, specifically whatever communications they had within the app called Signal. Signal is an app that promises end-to-end encrypted instant messaging, where users can communicate with one another with the promise of privacy and security. Nobody outside of the conversation can read what's being said, not even the developers of the app, not the police, not even the government. After Samuel was bailed out of jail and he returned to his followers, he allegedly continued to get rid of this evidence and started securing passports for some of his wives. But in the early morning hours of September 13th, 2022, dozens of armed FBI agents raided the Short Creek community yet again. Specifically, they raided 2 homes that were affiliated with Samuel Bateman, as well as the business address for that Velociraptor city. Velociraptor, it's not the dinosaur, it's Velociraptor, sorry guys. Which we know was obviously also affiliated with Samuel. But I guess a Velociraptor, like a predator, it kind of works. It works, whatever. So they went into the 2 houses, a greenhouse where he lived with his wives and a blue house that was about 2 blocks away from the greenhouse, where Marani Johnson lived with 2 other brothers named Torrance and Ladal Bistline. At the greenhouse where he lived, there was a white trailer that had been converted into a sewing room for all of his wives. When you enter this green home in the foyer or the prayer room, in this instance, you will see a big picture. In the framed picture is a 40-bedroom, multi-million-dollar compound with words that say, "Coming soon." Kind of like a vision board. They were basically vision boards framed in this room that consisted of photos of private jets, mansions, ATVs, Bentleys, Range Rovers, all these physical things that Samuel was going to pretty much will into existence. In other words, steal enough money from his followers to be able to build this compound and purchase all of these materialistic things. Next to the vision boards, you'll see this picture of Warren Jeffs himself. On the photo, it says he is free. Because, these people are all still convinced that he's dead, that he is no longer alive and that Samuel is their new prophet. The blue house was a bit bigger, and it had bunk beds for all of the women to sleep in. There's also photos of Warren Jeffs and previous FLDS leaders. At the warehouse, they seized hard drives, computers, his birth certificate, handwritten notes, journals, several cell phones, and even 2 adult toys. Gross. Samuel Bateman was taken back into custody again, and the Arizona Child Protective Services removed 9 underage girls from the Short Creek community. Those 9 girls were interviewed and placed into group homes pending dependency proceedings. A dependency proceeding is basically where they're going to determine whether these girls' parents or guardians are fit enough to take care of them or not. The 9 underage girls were taken into custody and given initial interviews. During these interviews, none of them disclosed any sort of assaults or anything like that on the part of Samuel Bateman. But one girl did say that she was present and partially nude during one of his infamous same-sex group gatherings. The word starts with an O. I don't know if I can say it on YouTube, so I'm not going to say it, but you know where I'm going, like a group sex activity. The agents ended up scheduling additional interviews with 5 of the 9 girls who stated that they had once slept in the same bed as Samuel, or they had written in their journals about kissing and touching him. According to the FBI, the girls refused to participate or cooperate fully in the interview, and the federal agents claimed that they believed that some of the older girls were influencing the younger girls not to talk. And we definitely know that the 3 wives, Naomi, Donna, and Moretta, were definitely influencing these underage girls, their sister wives, not to talk to authorities. So the 9 girls were separated from each other, and they were kept with their siblings and placed in different group homes around Arizona. During the time in those homes, one of the girls did disclose that she had in fact been assaulted by Samuel. Then on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, 8 of the 9 girls vanished from the homes that they were placed in, and their electronics that were left behind had suggested that the girls were still in contact with the 3 older wives, Naomi, Donna, and Moretta, using that Signal app, the encrypted app that nobody can see what the messages are. So at around 8:30 p.m., the night that the girls left the group home, Samuel Bateman made a video call from jail to his adult wives. This video call was recorded because he was in jail, of course, and I feel like anyone in jail would know that they are being recorded, but apparently Samuel Bateman has the IQ of like a roach and had no idea. In this video, it shows 2 adult wives sitting in the car. One is driving and one is in the passenger seat. The one in the passenger seat was the one holding the phone. The wife in the passenger seat informed Samuel that they had 2 of the minor wives with them and used code names E1 and E2. At around 7:30 a.m. the next morning, he made another call, recorded video call from jail to one of his adult wives. In this video, it looked like they were in a hotel room of some sort, and Samuel asked why W2, which is another code name for the girl who decided not to run away from DCFS custody, he asked why she was not with them. Now, court records show that the girl referred to as W2 was between the ages of 11 and 12 years old, and Samuel Bateman took her in as a new wife in May of 2020, which made her around 9 or 10 years old when she was forced to marry Samuel, who was in his 40s. The wife informed Samuel that W2 was the only wife who had not left with them, but that they tried to get her to leave. So during this call, the camera panned from the 2 adult wives to the 8 underage girls. Samuel then asked the question, "Are you in our state?" Which one of the adult wives replied, "No, the mothers are in Arizona and heading to New Mexico with the babies." The FBI eventually learned that a credit card, which belonged to the cousin of one of the wives, had been used to rent an Airbnb. So on November 28th, an emergency disclosure request was made to the Airbnb company, and the request was basically asking for the address of the house that the credit card number was used to book the house and any other houses booked with that same credit card or the cousin's name. By November 30th, Airbnb provided law enforcement with an address in Spokane, Washington. This house was reserved from November 29th to December 2nd. So on December 1st, a sergeant with the Spokane County Sheriff's Department knocked on the door to the Airbnb, but nobody answered. His backup witnessed the occupants of the house attempting to leave in a vehicle, with the driver identified as Moretta, one of Samuel's wives. The police pulled over the vehicle, and all 8 of Samuel Bateman's underage wives were in the car and recovered. The 3 wives, Naomi, Donna, and Moretta, were all arrested and charged of kidnapping and impeding a foreseeable prosecution. The 3 of them are now awaiting a federal trial, where they are facing 20 years to life in prison, which rightfully so. Naomi Bisline is actually relieved that she is away from it all, and stated that she doesn't want any contact with anybody involved in the FLDS. She's currently awaiting her next court appearance. Her lawyer put out a statement saying this: "She's beginning to understand how victimized she was. She's realizing that she has loving family members independent of the cult that are out there to support her, and she was, from the most part, cut off from all of that. She was denied release at her last hearing and remains behind bars despite the judge's acknowledgement of the fact that she has been victimized." Meanwhile, the lawyer for Donna echoed what Naomi's lawyer said about victimization and added, "She has been catapulted into a world foreign to her, and her incarceration is compounding the trauma that she's already endured in her young life. Danae is experiencing unimaginable agony being separated from her child. This is also the first time she has been separated from her mother, sister, and other close family members." Moretta still remains in custody in Spokane, Washington, where she awaits extradition, and there have been no statements made by her. Samuel Bateman faces charges of assault relating to children and federal charges of tampering with evidence. Samuel has, of course, pled not guilty to all state and federal charges against him. He has not yet, though, been charged with any assault charges relating to sexual activities or the exchange of children for money or other benefits. The FLDS is arguably one of the most toxic communities within the United States, and honestly, it needs to be eradicated. We know what's happening behind closed doors because we have been watching it happen for the last 100 years. We saw it implode on itself with the fall of Warren Jeffs, and then we watched the aftershocks with Samuel Bateman. It's only a matter of time before some other idiot tries to step up and convince people that he is the new prophet, which honestly, it's probably already happening. So when does the cycle end? How many more underage girls are going to have to marry these old men and be forced to have sex with them? How many more women are going to be forced to marry their actual family members and have these incestual relationships with their own uncles? I've never been brainwashed by a cult leader, I'll be honest, but I have to believe that on a cellular level, a mother knows what's right and wrong. A mother knows that her 9-year-old shouldn't be forced to have sex with a 40-year-old. Lydia, Samuel's first wife, knew, and Lydia got her daughter out of there. So my heart is with all of the victims of Rulon, Warren, and Samuel. I can't imagine the confusion and the terror that they all felt during all of this. And if you haven't watched the Netflix special, Keep Sweet and Obey, I highly, highly, highly recommend you watch it and go learn more about the depths of the FLDS and watch these women talk about the horror that they endured. It all needs to be exposed. Every single person needs to know about the FLDS and what kind of damage and destruction it causes. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Warren Jeffs' voice just creeps me out. It sends a shiver down my spine because there are so many recordings that have come out. There are prison calls that have come out. And we could do a deep dive for hours and hours and hours on not only Warren Jeffs, but about this community and the raids and some of the activities that have happened. So if you want more of this kind of content, because I know I don't talk about it a ton on here, do me a favor, comment below or just quickly like the video because then I can gauge based on how many people react with the thumbs up button if this is the kind of content you want to see more of. Just hit that thumbs up really quick if it is. And what I might do is, because we can do so many different deep dives onto so many different cults and so many different facets of this religion as well, Mike King from Profiling Evil, you guys may know him from watching him. He's also been a guest here on this channel multiple times. He is like the cult expert. He himself has not only studied these cults, but he has gone in and actually removed people from these cults. He's talked with cult leaders. So maybe what I'll do is I'll bring him on for another deep dive and really explain how these cults form and the brain of these men and how they're able to so successfully manipulate these people into blindly trusting them and following them, because Mike King is the absolute expert in all of this. I mean, truthfully, he is. So if you want that too, you just let me know in the comments. But if you want more deep dives on some of this stuff, I promise we're not going to become a cult-only channel at all. But there is just so many more layers to this. Just do me a quick favor, like this video so I can gauge how many people truly want more of that. Or, of course, let me know in the comments. All right, thanks so much for tuning in with me today, guys. I know it was not an easy one to hear, but this stuff always fascinates me, always. There's something about it, and cults in general always fascinates me. Does it fascinate you, or is it just me? Let me know. All right, guys, thanks so much, and until the next one, stay safe.